Thank you very much, Secretary. It's my understanding that this administration has taken several steps to try to address this issue and has tapped the Strategic Petroleum Reserve 3 different times to try to get more gas into the market. I support these actions and agree that we should take as many steps as we can to address gasoline prices. Madam Secretary, excuse me, can you explain whether oil being released from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is going to be able to create any meaningful relief at the pump? And what else can be done, if anything?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for this question. As we know, the invasion of Ukraine, Russia is a huge exporter of oil on the global market, and the invasion of Ukraine pulled initially 1.5 to 2 million barrels per day off of that global market. So for us in the United States, we are asking, how can we increase enough supply so that when supply like that is crunched, the prices don't go up out of control? The biggest tool we have in our arsenal is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And so the president has called, first of all, upon our oil and gas industry to produce more with the permits that they have and the ability that they have to increase supply. Second, he's called for the release of 1 million barrels per day for the next 6 months as the oil and gas industry improves their production. The Energy Information Agency has said that by the end of this year, that we will see an additional 1 million barrels per day from our domestic suppliers. And so that's why the president has called for an increase in 1 million barrels per day from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to balance out the markets. Now, the U.S. has said we will not accept Russian oil, which is great. So has Canada and a number of other nations. The EU is on the verge of doing something similar. If the EU pulls their supply, if they say no more Russian oil for us, that will be another perhaps 1.5 million barrels that are pulled off the market. So then we'll have about 3 million barrels off the market. That will create additional volatility. We'll see prices likely to increase. So while we are doing all we can to make sure that supply and demand meet itself to stabilize, I think this war has only accelerated the urgency with which we must move to electrify transportation and to move toward clean energy. Clean energy that is American-made is energy that is not going to be subject to the volatility of petrodictators, to the volatility of a fossil fuel market that is global in nature. So that's why the president's goal is to try to stabilize supply now and try to move as well toward clean energy. And finally, I will say that the president is doing everything he can within his power in this global market to make sure that we lessen our demand on oil, for example, by increasing the E15, the ethanol blend in gasoline, taking that to E15 so that we reduce, again, the amount of oil that's necessary. This is a very, very difficult situation, but I think ultimately it screams that we must accelerate toward clean energy.
I would just like to address one California question to you. We've discussed this previously, but we're experiencing a climate emergency, and California is bearing the brunt of a lot of these changes. We find that temperatures are causing more intense heat waves, making western wildfires more frequent, destructive, and deadly. These are straining our power grids and forcing us to rethink their design. Just last year in California, 2.5 million acres burned. It destroyed 3,600 structures. The recent infrastructure bill would provide billions to help states upgrade their aging infrastructure. And so we're pleased about that. But can you help us understand how quickly this historic funding can be implemented to help states upgrade their aging energy infrastructure?
Yes, thank you for that, too. The part I think that's very hopeful for California in the bipartisan infrastructure law related to energy infrastructure is the $5 billion for resiliency, which could be used for the purposes of undergrounding wires in strategic locations. And so we are in the process. We'll be putting out a funding opportunity announcement shortly. We just called for a request for information from stakeholders about how they would like to see that portion funded. I will also say, I know I'm over time, but we are also focused on the technology associated with the grid that will allow us to enhance sensors, drones, modeling, so that we know that we can anticipate when wildfires are coming, so that both the technology as well as undergrounding are hopeful improvements for California and states like it.
Thank you. Senator Collins?